we have today one of those very unusual gospel stories that's just completely intriguing. Jesus sticks his fingers in a man's ears and he grabs a hold of his tongue. And this is not an ordinary way to heal somebody. Why does he do it? It is to fulfill the prophets. We'll get to that. First, we're told that Jesus is traveling, and he goes past the Sea of Galilee. He's heading north to the Decapolis, which Deca in the Greek means 10, and polis means city, so it's the 10 cities. This is Gentile territory, and so he's fulfilling his mission of gathering the lost tribes, the 10 northern tribes that had been scattered among the nations. This is a sign of the new covenant, where all peoples will be drawn to him. And so he's out proclaiming the good news. And they bring him a man who is deaf, couldn't hear, and mute, he couldn't speak. And they ask him to lay hands on him. And Jesus ignores them, doesn't do that. He takes the man off by himself. Now, as far as the crowds are concerned, there's a man who is mute and deaf, and at the end of the story, he can hear and he can speak plainly. But Jesus pulls him aside, and the sticking of the fingers in the ears and grabbing the tongue, that's done amongst his apostles. He pulls him aside privately among his disciples. They're the ones who are telling the story. And so why does he? So it's revealing something specifically to his inner circle, to the 12 apostles. Now, I don't know about you, but if I went to a doctor, someone that I was looking to heal me, and they stuck their fingers in my ears, or they grabbed onto my tongue, I think I would go see another doctor. Don't you think? Not only grabbed his tongue, but he spit. And he put his saliva in his mouth. Can you believe that? I know. It's like, why would he do that? Well, he's fulfilling our first reading today. The prophet Isaiah, the whole second half of the book of the prophet of Isaiah speaks about the second Exodus. Isaiah is the prophet of the second Exodus. It is going to be even greater than the first Exodus, which was accompanied by all kinds of miracles and things. And one of the greatest of these miracles we see in Numbers 20 and Exodus chapter 17, the water from the rock. They're in the desert, they're thirsty. There's no water anywhere in the desert. And God brings forth water from a rock. And so Isaiah 35, we saw at the end of our little verses today, that there will be springs of water and ponds of water, and water will be everywhere. It's going to be even greater than the miracle in the first Exodus. Now, the difference between the first Exodus and the second one is that in the second Exodus, it's not going to be Moses that leads the people. It's going to be, as Isaiah tells us, God himself. God himself is going to minister and save his people. He's going to vindicate them. It's going to be God who works the miracles. It's going to be God who makes the lame leap, the blind see. And we've seen Jesus do this as we're following through the Gospel of Mark. And he's going to open, clear the deaf one's ears. And he's going to loosen the tongue. How do you loosen it? You reach in and you grab it, you loose it. That's what he does in today's gospel passage. And what he's saying to his apostles is that I am fulfilling Isaiah 35. I am God incarnate. It is God who is in your midst. It is God through these hands that is touching this man's ears and opening him. It is God who is releasing the tongue of this man. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear about these miracles, I'm thinking about, like a good doctor. So we have surgeries today that can do operations on the ears and can fix certain things, And so that's what I'm thinking about. But Jesus Jesus' miracles go beyond just a physical restoration. For example, the paralyzed man, whom he says, pick up your mat and walk. We're talking about someone that was paralyzed for their life. They would have no muscle tone. Atrophy would have set it. There's no muscle. We know with our kids, it takes a long time to teach them to walk. But he just gets up and starts walking. He can carry his bedroll. So we're talking about miraculous restoration. The same is true of the man in today's gospel passage today. He had never heard the spoken language. He was deaf. They didn't have people that did signing back then. And he was not a scholar. He couldn't read. So he had no knowledge of language. So as Jesus looses his tongue, there's no learning. He doesn't have to go to speech therapy to learn how to speak. He doesn't have to listen to people talking for a while to pick up certain vocabulary, to pick up certain words. But rather, God gives this man language. And he speaks plainly. The same way that God gave Adam and Eve language. It is a miraculous gift. Jesus is restoring all that has fallen apart since the fall of Adam and Eve. It is a new creation, and it is God who is leading his people. A couple of things we can learn about. First is to be humble and to allow God to minister to us. When I hear of this man who lets Jesus stick his fingers in his ears and grab his tongue, I think of Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5. Naaman has leprosy, and he hears that there is a great God of Israel. So he goes to the king of Israel and he asks for a healing. Of course, the king rips his garment. Elisha, the successor of Elijah, hears that the king has ripped his garments and says, don't rip your garments. Let him know that there is a powerful God in Israel. I will go out and greet him. So he sends Naaman to dunk himself, to bathe himself 7 times in the Jordan River for a miraculous healing. 7 is, as we know, the number of the covenant. So basically, this is a prophetic sign that with the new covenant that is coming, it is through baptism that we will enter into. Naaman's a Gentile, so this is pointing to the future covenant that we are currently in, that through baptism we enter. So Naaman is offended by this. Naaman says, isn't the water in Damascus better than all the water of Israel? Why would I dunk myself in this muddy river Jordan? And his servant tells him to be submissive. And so the first thing we can learn from today's gospel passage is when something seems a little unusual, to allow the Lord the intimacy to touch our hearts, to touch our minds, to open us to his presence. The second thing we learn this weekend is we're reminded that we are on the new Exodus. That like them, we are journeying through the valley of darkness. We are following the Lord. No longer an exodus from bondage in Egypt to the freedom of the land of milk and honey, but rather from the bondage to sin. This is a holy pilgrimage, a holy exodus, and it is the Lord himself who gives us the manna. That's what we're here for today, to receive the true manna that comes down from heaven, his body and blood, soul and divinity. And in that manna, just like the manna in today's gospel, we touch divinity. We are touched and we touch God. And so let our hearts, our eyes, our ears, our tongues be opened. Let us experience the presence of God who sets us free.